Hello and welcome aboard the Silverwind. My name is Captain Tom and I am joined by our co-host and producer, then also intergalactic robot Wilson. So it's always such a long intro for you. All right, so we've got a killer show today as we were talking about Genesis chapter 4, and yeah, we've there's going to be a little bit to break down with it, not as much as chapter 3. So I'm going to try and respect our time here, not go over an hour like I did last time. There was just a lot in chapter 3 of the Bible, right? So we're going to break down the story of chapter 4, and it is about Cain and Abel, plus a little bit more stuff. So we're going to get right into that. In respect to time, we're just going to go ahead and jump over to where we will be. There we go. We'll be reading the story. There we go. Those are the words I was looking for. So let's go ahead and make that happen. Here we go. All right, Wilson, let's go. Okay. All right, so as we head over to where we're going, we're actually heading to Jupiter. And yeah, I'm actually really excited to show you guys this because it is one of the coolest planets in the solar system, as it is one of the largest, and it's got some pretty interesting things going on. So let me go ahead and see here. All right, so we've got, we're traveling right now, guys. Let's see. To make sure. There it is. Look at that. Wait, Wilson, did we almost hit something? Hold up. Oh my gosh. Let's see. All right, that should lock us. Nope, that will not lock us into place. Wilson, you did it again. All right, Wilson, hold up. I will fix this. There we go. Okay. All right. So here is Jupiter, everybody, and yeah. So it looks like, did we almost hit something on the way over here? Was that like a moon or something? Oh man, you gotta watch your driving. It doesn't matter if it's 100,000 miles away. Like, it's still, that got pretty close. Okay, so fun facts about Jupiter. Let's talk about this thing. So this is a gas planet. It is the largest planet in the solar system. It's the second largest thing in the solar system. And because of that, it has one of the biggest gravitational fields in the solar system. And last week we talked about how the moon kind of helps be a little blocker for some asteroids to get close to Earth. There's a good chance that they get attracted to the moon. And then, kind of helps protect us a little bit. It's not the best defense, but the best defense against major asteroids that will make their way into our solar system is the planet behind us right here, because it just kind of vacuums up all those things. Most likely they will get caught in this guy's gravitational field. And that's great for us because it acts as a really good shield for us. Some other things is that it was formed, supposedly formed about 4.5 billion years ago, drifted into the solar system. Some call it a failed star. It didn't get enough gas around it. Probably some kind of, some solid core to some degree. A lot of gas got attracted to it. And it's basically a bunch of hydrogen and helium at this point with some other things going on. So there's a lot of activity on this planet. Right over here is, let's see if I can point to it. Right over here is, they call it the, what do they call it? The red dot. I usually color it in when they have pictures of it. But yeah, typically that's colored in with big red dye or whatever. It's the big red spot, I think is what it's called. But it's a giant storm. It's been going on for hundreds of years. And this planet has a very, very violent atmosphere. I mean, tons of storms are going on, and these currents, these are called, so the light parts are called zones and the dark parts are called bands, and these are actually kind of a mixture of different things going on. It's like there's temperature differences, and there's also some I think there's some differences as far as what is actually there. So there's like some other things other than just hydrogen and helium. And so there are these layers of different things in the atmosphere, and they're actually flowing in opposite directions. So all along this planet, you got violent, it's like flowing this way, and that band's flowing that way. And so you have these massive currents actually going against one another all up this entire planet, which is pretty remarkable for something that is 4.5 billion years old and is still this active. I, for one, think that maybe that's a little bit difficult to believe. I mean, if something's been, when I was trying to figure out earlier, well, why haven't these gases mixed? I mean, if you got a bunch of gases in a chamber going in opposite directions against one another, eventually they're going to start mixing up and equalizing out, right? I mean, we have air currents and stuff on Earth, but of course our atmosphere is pretty well mixed up. And apparently it's because these currents are so fast and so strong, it doesn't give them the ability to mix. And if that's been going on for 4.5 billion years, that is a lot of energy going on inside this thing for a very long time, to a point of, well, it's kind of hard to believe, right? Well, regardless of what you believe about it, if it drifted in 4.5 billion years ago, it's just been that active for that long, or perhaps it was put there by design, and maybe a little bit more recently, and it was just designed to be this chaotic, swirling, stormy planet. But regardless, it does act as a really good defense mechanism for us on Earth, and perhaps that's just a coincidence. We'll add that to the coincidence jar. So that's Jupiter here. I do want to say hello to Julian. Let's see here. Watch out for the space debris when traveling. Yeah, seriously. Did you figure out what the name of that moon was? Calypso? We almost hit Calypso. I hear that they think there might be some life on Calypso. Maybe we'll go to Calypso next week. That'll be fun, since you almost hit it. Okay, so yeah, let's go ahead and turn this ship around, and we will go ahead and start the reading so we can actually get through the discussion. So we'll go ahead and while I'm walking back aft to the reading room, we'll go and do a little short transitionary screen so we can get the ship turned around for you guys. Feel free to grab a coffee or notepad if you want. This show's for anyone who wants to, if you want to know more about these Bible stories because this is part of your faith, or you want to know more about it because these are human stories and this is one of the most impactful pieces of literature that has ever existed, and you want to understand it. We're here for everyone, right? Everyone is welcome on board. So let's go ahead and get to it. All right, here we are. Listen, you can get us a little bit closer here. Okay, so this is we might as well get started. Okay, so a little bit of review. So the thing we covered last week was Adam and Eve. They're the first man, the first woman, and they sinned. Basically, they acted outside of God's design. They broke the one rule he gave them. And they were essentially kicked out of the garden, and that's where we're kind of left with. So what happens after that? What do they get up to? And it gets pretty interesting pretty quick. So I'll go ahead and read this to you guys. It says this: Now Adam, he knew his wife Eve, and she became pregnant. When she gave birth to Cain, she said, "With the Lord's help, I have produced a man." Later, she gave birth to his brother and named him Abel. All right. So then the Bible talks about two people knew each other. It's just a polite way of saying that, they had sexual relations, right? So that's basically what is going on there. And the text here is actually really interesting because it leaves room for understanding that there may be other children involved in this. And Cain and Abel are being brought up specifically because they're important to the story, but that doesn't mean that Cain is the firstborn child. It just means that Cain is the firstborn son, right? So let me go ahead and read this again so you guys can see this. It says that, so he knew his wife Eve, and she became pregnant, period. When she gave birth to Cain, so there could be a window of time there. He could be the firstborn, but it's also a good chance because there's some interesting stuff going on with the language and what she's celebrating. She's not just celebrating the fact that she has a son, right? I have a firstborn son and that sort of thing. Her name for him has a meaning to it. And it actually says, or actually translates to, "I've got him," or "here he is." It's this exclamation of, it could be one of two things, two main things. In the previous chapter, God cursed the serpent and told him that, someone born from the woman would end up crushing his head and he would strike his heel. So a wounded savior would come from Eve and essentially destroy the serpent, destroy the devil. Now, maybe she thinks Cain is the fulfillment of that and is like, thank goodness, here we go. And so she's really excited that he's here. The other thing that it could be is that she has had other children. They've just all been girls up to this point. Maybe she's had 1 or 2 girls up to this point. And now she has, is giving birth to a man. And it's this really exciting thing, particularly for that reason, right? So it could be one of the 2 of those things. It could be both of those things. But there's a clear, it emphasizes her amazement at the fact that he's a man. Which is, pretty interesting thing for it to point out. So there could also be a room between when it talks about Cain and Abel. She could essentially had daughters between there. And so you might be asking, well, why wouldn't they just list the daughters then? And the reason for that is that this is starting what's called a genealogy. A genealogy is not recording all of a family whenever they go through essentially like the ancestry. The whole point of it is to point to where a people group came from. And so the main point of this genealogy is to connect the dots between Adam and Noah, which is going to be a very important person. And then the genealogies will continue after that, connecting Noah to Abraham and so on and so forth. And so like important figures in the Bible, they get these genealogies. Jesus gets a couple of them later on in the New Testament. And all of it is essentially to try and say, hey, look, there are all these people groups. This is the history. This is where they came from. So when they say so-and-so begot so-and-so, that doesn't necessarily mean that's like their first kid and only kid. It just means that is the significant figurehead, for that ancestral line. So typically guys are highlighted in these genealogies just because it's male patriarchs who kind of father nations for the most part. A really good example of this is Romulus and Remus. So the Roman people came from Romulus. And it's kind of funny because it's very similar to this story right here. We have the Israelites. Jacob gets the name Israel later. And so the people who come from Jacob are the Israelites because his name is also Israel. He has 12 sons. They become the 12, essentially, the figureheads for the 12 tribes of or Israel. There we go. I'm getting things mixed up. And then when you have, like Judah is one of the sons of Jacob, but, you would have the tribe of Judah, right? So essentially these genealogies are trying to point to that. So they're not trying to list specifically all the kids. And it's part of why there's an emphasis here that, hey, this is her firstborn son in this genealogy. Because that will not necessarily be assumed. And then, another question, well, why not just put that information in there since it's going to be like a text, right? I mean, this stuff is supposed to be written by Moses on Mount Sinai with God. He's given him all this inside information, and that's, supposed to be the author of the text. Well, when they're writing this, they're trying to write it as briefly as possible and even as poetically as possible because they want it to be something that's easily memorized. Not everyone's going to have the access to be able to read or the access to even if they can read, to read the documents directly when these things are recorded. Essentially, they want to make it in such a way that people are able to memorize it in society. And the easiest way to do that is keep it as brief as possible and make it rhyme or give it some kind of cadence. And so especially the first 12 books of the Bible of Genesis are written in this way, and a lot of other books in the Bible are written in this poetic fashion as well. So it helps for memorization, and we know she was having daughters, and the further evidence of that happens later. So that helps to kind of give an understanding what's going on right here. But the main thing is that she has 2 sons, Cain and Abel, and they're going to be important for what happens next. Now, when they grew up, Abel became a shepherd while Cain cultivated the ground. When it was time for the harvest, Cain presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. Okay. So Abel was, I'm sorry. Let me go ahead and back up right here. I'm kind of having a hard time seeing this and I kind of stumbling over it. All right, so starting over. When they grew up, Abel became a shepherd, while Cain cultivated the ground. When it was time for harvest, Cain presented some of his crops as a gift to the Lord. Abel also brought a gift, the best of his firstborn lambs from his flock. The Lord accepted Abel and his gift, but he did not accept Cain and his gift. This made Cain very angry, and he looked dejected. Couple of things to break down there. So a gift to the Lord. So this may or may not have been a sacrifice. The language essentially it just means gift. It's very vague. But in giving this, it gives a description that Cain is giving some of what he's cultivated, right? And Abel is giving the best, the firstborn lamb of his flock. And so I think it's the best of the firstborn lamb of his flock. So there's a distinct difference in the description here, and that's that Cain is kind of going through the motions. He's not really giving God his best. He's just trying to check a box. Where Abel, his heart really is for God, and he wants to give God his absolute best. And so God accepts Abel's gift and rejects Cain's gift on that basis. And you also have in, I believe it's Hebrews, I wrote this down here, for reference. Hebrews 11 verse 4, you get another reference to that in the Bible where it talks about the situation, and it points to that's the reason why Cain's gift is not accepted. So it has nothing to do with the fact that he's offering grains as opposed to an animal. So with that, the Lord obviously doesn't accept his gift, and then it makes it look like Cain starts to like pout or have a pity party right there in front of the Lord. So he's very focused on himself, clearly. So he's, it's one thing when you get corrected, you had this experience with your parents, you get corrected and you're like, okay, I accept that correction. All right, I'll do better. And then there's the case where you get corrected and then you just immediately start throwing a pity party and start moping. Well, that's extremely disrespectful to, the parent or the authority in that situation, because that's, an emotional manipulation of, oh, I'm going to make you feel bad for not accepting what I did or for getting on to me or that sort of thing, which just goes to show you didn't really learn your lesson. You're just trying to manipulate the situation. So anyways, he's focused on himself clearly. And let's see exactly what it is that God has to say in response to that. Some people call this poor me syndrome, by the way, which I think is pretty funny. It has a funny acronym. So anyways, let's go ahead and read the next part. I'm going to read 8 through 12. One day, skipped ahead. Here we go. I'm going to read starting with 6 through 7. Why are you so angry? The Lord asked Cain. Why do you look so dejected? You will be accepted if you do what is right. But if you refuse to do what is right, then watch out. Sin is crouching at the door, eager to control you, but you must subdue it and be its master. All right, so God is giving Cain, some fatherly advice in this situation. He really is trying to set Cain up for success, and he's warning him, like, listen, there's an issue in your heart, and if you don't control that issue, it will control you, and bad things are going to happen, right? So God is doing his best to try and help Cain out here, trying to lead him in the right direction here. And it has some very simple logic. If you do what is right, you'll be accepted. God doesn't have it out for Cain, just to be a bully, right? God is, legitimately has a concern with what Cain did. All right. So let's go ahead and read what happens next, because it's it's gonna get wild. So now this is gonna be 8 through 12, and let's see what Cain does with this advice. Is he gonna listen or not listen? All right. One day Cain suggested to his brother, "Let's go out to the fields." And while they were in the field, Cain attacked his brother Abel and killed him. Afterward, the Lord asked Cain, "Where is your brother? Where is Abel?" "I don't know," Cain replied. "Am I my brother's keeper?" That famous line, your brother's keeper. So, so Cain was so obsessed with, or really just, like most people, just really thinking inward about himself, and is a form of self-worship, right? So he either can be, so we have Abel who's focused on the Lord, Cain who's focused on himself, and he can't accept in this correction, he can't accept this at all. And so he does this horrible thing and ends up killing his brother. And you have God ask him about it. And once again, it's very similar to Adam and Eve's story where, God shows up in the garden like, where are you? God knows where they are. Did you eat of the fruit I told you not to eat? He knew the answer to this question, but this is part of God's personality. He still asks the question. He still gets our involvement in that response. All right. And yeah, so let's see here. Okay, so now we're going to see what God has to say in this situation and see if there's any kind of justice here. But the Lord said, "What have you done? Listen, your brother's blood cries out to me from the ground. Now you are cursed and banished from the ground, which has swallowed your brother's blood. No longer will the ground yield good crops for you, no matter how hard you work. From now on, you will be a homeless wanderer on the earth." Okay, so if you've ever had a difficult time growing plants, this would be that times 10. So God has taken away taking away Cain's passion and occupation, which means that he doesn't have the skills to survive because he's not able to grow food and do what he's good at. He's also likely not going to be allowed to be in the family anymore. He's probably going to be kicked out. So all this stuff is going to be, obviously, there's a poetic justice in the sense that Abel's gone. All these animals have to be taken care of. And so there's a good chance that Cain had to essentially become a shepherd and take care of animals because he could no longer make a living off of, growing food. And so that would almost act as a reminder to him all the days of his life, what he had done, now having to do the occupation of his brother, which he probably didn't like to do. So yeah, so we have that going on. Let's see here. Let's see if I got on my notes for you guys. Obviously, this was premeditated murder. That was another thing I wanted to point out. This was not a passion of the moment kind of thing. Yeah, there's no excuse for what he did. Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, and here's a good question. Here's a question that I have for you guys, and you can, comment on the live stream or comment on the comment section below. My question for you is this: so why didn't God protect Abel? So Abel was doing what he was supposed to do. He gave a sacrifice to God the way he was supposed to do it, or a gift to God the way he was supposed to do it, and Cain didn't. Yet God doesn't protect Abel in this situation. Had God just intervened, couldn't he prevented the whole thing? And I'll give you my thoughts at the end on that. But yeah, just a question I want you to think about, because it's a good challenging question about this story and the concept of God in general. Why doesn't he just swoop in and stop evil if he doesn't like it? Kind of like a superhero, I mean, he has the power to. So yeah, it's a good question. Let's go ahead and move on to the next part, though. We're going to read 13 through 17. All right, here's Cain's response. Cain replied to the Lord, "My punishment is too great for me to bear. You have banished me from the land and from your presence. You have made me a homeless wanderer. Anyone who finds me will kill me." The Lord replied, "No, for I will give sevenfold punishment to anyone who kills you." Then the Lord put a mark on Cain to warn anyone who might try to kill him. So Cain left the Lord's presence and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. All right. So, Cain, in his response, he doesn't seem very sorry. He's still focused on what? Himself. And this will definitely show in the rest of the chapter here, as it basically breaks down mainly Cain's line, Cain's genealogy, and we get to see, what kind of family line he ends up producing. So let's go ahead. Let's look at a few things right here. So still focused on himself. And yet, despite all of this, God still shows mercy and kindness to Cain by protecting him from anyone basically, from getting revenge and going after him. These blood feuds, that sort of thing, where one person kills one person, another person's going to kill that person, and then it just turns into a huge mess. So God is putting into it right there, saying, no, 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 this isn't going to turn into anything more than this. I've put a stop to this. You're going to be banished. You're going to go away, and you're going to have to make your own way. But I'm not going to allow someone else to, or at least I'm going to provide a warning so that no one else will harm you. So still showing mercy and kindness by protecting him, which also shows God's character. And in this situation, we're actually about to read in the next verse here that Cain has a wife, and that begs the question. Well, the only woman mentioned in the story so far is Eve, and it clearly couldn't be her. So who is Cain's wife? Now, some people have speculated that there are other people that God created that are not from Adam, right? Well, there's a lot of issues with that. The story as a whole doesn't leave room for that. The story as a whole says that through one man, Adam, sin entered the world to all people. And so because it teaches that all people sin, there would be, it'd be really problematic for there to be other people that existed that haven't sinned. Then why would they get punished with things and that sort of thing? So it really kind of makes a lot of things really convoluted and not make a lot of sense if there were other people that God created. And just in coming up with that just to explain that where Cain found a wife, it's unnecessary. It's unnecessary because it's clear that who he would have married would have been his sister. Now, the reason for this is, we know through this, what we were talking about in the first few verses, that, most likely there were daughters being born, and Cain and Abel had sisters. So with that, would there be a problem with those kind of close relations all the way back then? Well, we kind of have to look into genetics a little bit to talk about that, but I do want to talk about something else first. I want to talk about a different worldview, a materialist worldview, for just a second. So Charles Darwin in his theory, where he talks about where people came from, he doesn't say that people came from monkeys, like modern day monkeys, like apes and chimpanzees and that sort of thing. He says that, humans came from the same thing that apes and chimpanzees came from. So some kind of pre-monkey ancestor, some kind of animal got all over the world, got into islands at all the corners of the world, maybe not the Americas yet, but they got all over the place. And then they all started to individually evolve into humans, right? So this is Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, and that from that one creature, or that one type of creature, humans evolved from it, and so did a lot of modern monkeys, such as apes and chimpanzees. So with that worldview, it suggests that there are, different human races, because people don't all have a common human ancestor, that they have a common animal ancestor, but not a common human ancestor, making a bunch of different, human races all over the earth. And so that is the, social Darwinist, perspective, and it's based on Charles Darwin's theory on evolution. Modern day genetics actually gives us a very different picture. So modern day science in the field of genetics has shown that all people on the earth actually share a human ancestor, right? So they don't share a common animal ancestor, but all people on the earth are related to one original family of humans, which is pretty amazing. It could just be a coincidence that the Bible lines up with that discovery. We gotta make like a chart of coincidences as we go through all this stuff, because it's almost like we're bringing it up all the time. So maybe we'll put like Wilson, could you, like, after the show, like, make a list, and we'll just keep adding on to it in every episode, just coincidence after coincidence, and we'll what do you mean you don't have time for that? I gotta take a nap afterward. I'm not gonna listen. Humans have to take naps, like you're awake 24/7. Like, that's something that you should do. Anyways, sorry about that. Wilson will work on that. I'll make sure he takes care of that. And but yeah, so we've got which means, and this is actually really, really important, that all people are related. So you're watching me right now. I'm a distant relative from you. All people on the earth are related to one another. Now, that begs the question, especially with these early humans, that first family, well, wouldn't that cause a bunch of genetic mutations? I mean, isn't that the danger of close relationships, close familiar relationships like that? Well, it wouldn't have been a problem back then. You see, with Adam and Eve, their gene pool would have been the fullest that the human gene pool could ever be. So genetic mutations, aside from radiation, which is an outside source breaking down your DNA, genetic mutations come from when you have too many similar genes. So if the half of the genes you get from mom and half the genes you get from dad are both too similar, then it creates a lot of problems when you're creating a new DNA strand and creating that new person at conception. So it's, in this situation, when the gene pool is a lot more diversified, has a lot more dominant and recessive genes in it, you actually don't run into that issue, or that issue would have been extremely minimalized for that first family of humans. And only when you really only start shallowing out the gene pool when different groups of people, let's just say you and your brother, you get half your genes from your father, half your genes from your mother, and you and your brother, you like move to two different places, right? You go to two different corners of the globe. Well, there are genetics that your brother had that you don't have, right? And some genetics that you have that your brother doesn't have. And so when you move away like that and continue to have, more generations of people, it's the spreading out of people across the globe that causes the gene pool to get more and more shallow, and you get more into those, specific traits that become a lot more common in a group of people. So you can look at someone and be like, oh, that person is from, somewhere in Asia. That person's from somewhere in India or Europe or Africa or, indigenous Americans, that sort of thing. And that's because the gene pool starts shallowing down, and there's not as many variety of genes, and so things start looking a bit more common, for that group of people. So Adam and Eve have all the genetics, all the dominant recessive genes that the entire human race will ever have, and because they have so many variety of genetics in there, and this is an interesting thought as well, Eve has all the same genetics that Adam has. Which is for everyone. Like Eve is literally, she was made from Adam's body, and just literally a piece of his body just grew and made a female version of Adam. Like she has the two X chromosomes, he has the X and Y. And so, it's just very interesting to think about. But it really actually doesn't present a problem at all. You would have had very few, if any, genetic defects in the first group of humans, so long as you had a full gene pool. And it also goes to show, when you see the pictures of Adam and Eve and they're very light skinned, very unlikely that's the case. Light skin is a recessive gene, is probably more of a middle tone brown. That's a more realistic perspective of what early humans were looking like. So with that, and of course you can always point to the dog when you're talking about these types of things with genetics. From a wolf ancestor, you're able to get Chihuahuas and Great Danes and everything under the sun with what you see with dogs. And that was just a simple process of removing genetic material from the generations of, animals. And you do that by essentially, they call it breeding, but a lot of it's inbreeding as well. And they basically, you find two cubs that have very similar traits of what you're wanting. You pair them up, and then you keep pulling the ones out that you want of a specific trait until you weed out all the other genetic information, which is why purebred dogs tend to have more health problems, because they're lacking a lot of that original genetic material that was helpful to them in other ways. So anyways, big thing on genetics. The whole thing about that is just to say that we're all one big family. And wouldn't it be a different place in the world if we all saw each other that way? And as a matter of fact, speaking of this being kind of like a family reunion, if we can get all the world on board the Silverwind and just really fill up this family reunion right here, and just share common stories that belong to you guys, right? These are human stories. These stories belong to you, and I'm just giving them back to you, right? So with that, make sure you like and subscribe and share. That definitely helps. So with that, let's go ahead and continue on with the story here. I'm going to go ahead and read this next section. Let's enjoy this view right here. This will be nice. Okay. All right, so we covered that we are related. Let's go ahead and we're actually getting near to the end of the story here, so this will be really, really good. Okay, so like I said, when I read this part right here, I want you guys to be thinking about the line of humans here and what they're doing. So this is going to be Cain's line that we're going to be reading. All right, so Cain had sexual relations with his wife, and she became pregnant and gave birth to Enoch. Then Cain founded a city, which he named Enoch after his son. Enoch had a son named Irad. Irad became the father of Mehujael. Mehujael became the father of Methuselah. Methuselah became the father of Lamech. Lamech married 2 women. The first was named Adah, and the second was Zillah. Right. Adah gave birth to Jabal, who was the first of those who raised livestock and lived in tents. His brother's name was Jubal, the first of all who played the harp and flute. Lamech's other wife, Zillah, gave birth to a son named Tubal-Cain. He became an expert in forging tools of bronze and iron. Tubal-Cain had a sister named Numa. One day Lamech said to his wives, Adah and Zillah, hear my voice. Listen to me, you wives of Lamech. I have killed a man who attacked me, a young man who wounded me. If someone who kills Cain is punished 7 times, then the one who kills me will be punished 77 times. All right, so we do get an interesting picture here of people, you know, and how they're living. There's people making instruments and tools and agriculture, and showing that these are concepts that were just like very early for people in the story. And so, you know, there's no like Neanderthal period or caveman period for them or anything like that. They just, you know, they're as smart as people are today, right? So yeah, so you have this situation where we get to see what's kind of happening with the morality, and it really just goes to show the degeneracy of the morality of Cain's line. So we have a character here, and make sure I get his name correct. It's Lamech. So Lamech has 2 wives, and not only does he have 2 wives, so this is probably a king. Not only does he have 2 wives, he's you know, which is never pointed out as being a positive thing in the Bible, but he's bragging about killing a young man who wounded him. Now, it's probably likely that this young man who's weaker than him, maybe the wounding was not like really anything life-threatening, but basically he had in defense a young person offended him, and he murders him, and then he claims in a way, and almost like he's bragging, you know, well, if someone kills Cain, you know, and they'll get punished 7 times, then surely because I did something far worse than Cain, mine will be 77 times. And so it's almost like a scoff against God. It's not a focus on God at all, or revering God in any way. God gave you know, some protection to Cain and put a mark on him for that protection. So, I mean, Lamech's not right about what he's asserting, but he's bragging, right? He's bragging about doing an evil thing. And why does he have to tell his wives this? I mean, is it maybe his wives wanted to kill him? Maybe he's saying this in response to his wives because they really, really don't like him. That could be the case. Maybe I'm reading a little too much into it. But the picture of the story is that Cain's line is in moral decline, right? And yeah, we don't actually get too much about them in the rest of the story here, and that's probably why. So let's go ahead and let's go to a nice view right here and read out the rest of this. All right, so Adam knew his wife again, and she gave birth to another son. She named him Seth, for she said, God has granted me another son in place of Abel, whom Cain killed. When Seth grew up and he had a son and named him Enosh, at that time people first began to worship the Lord by name. Okay, so what is that saying about Seth and the legacy that Seth has? So basically that's just to say that you have two distinct people groups now. You've have Adam and Eve sinned, and there's a system, some kind of system of worship or system for, they're giving gifts to God. Maybe those were sacrifices. There's some kind of system in place for them to be made right with God, at least for the temporary, and to be, in some kind of community with him. So in some kind of worship of him. You have a line of humans from Cain who disregards God and isn't very moral. And then you have a line that is very moral and worships God by name, right? So it's kind of a close, intimate thing. Now, the next part of the story, which we'll read next time, we'll see what happens with this situation. So you have two lines, an ungodly line and a godly line, and we'll see what happens with that. If the godly line will be maintained or if the whole thing will get messed up again, we shall see. So, yeah, I think with that, I think we're going to go ahead and probably head back to the front of the ship, unless you guys have any kind of questions or anything like that. Let's see here. I want to make sure. All right. Okay, well, we are going to go ahead and go forward. Wilson, are you ready for us to take this back home? I think we did pretty good on our time today. That will be good. So let's go ahead and do that. I'll see you guys in just a second. All right. Okay, well, so I know we just turned around. Well, let's go ahead and turn around again and get back home. Let's see here. Let me put this in here. You guys can go ahead and say bye to Jupiter. Okay. I think that should do it and should get us back home. Perfect. Okay. All right. So with that, I do want to say that, I think most of us understand the story that there's eventually some kind of worldwide flood. And, we're going to get to why that happens. The next chapter actually has some really cool things in it. We're going to get into some very interesting texts that are very widely debated on what they mean. Some things with like angels trying to intermarry with humans and and what does that mean, that sort of thing. So definitely looking forward to that discussion with you guys. And with that, so keep in mind what we are doing here is we are trying to bring as many people on board the Silverwind to share these stories. What's the best way to say this? So if you know any humans, that's the best way to say it. That's generally what Wilson wants to say. If you know any humans, like, this stuff is for them, right? These stories are, especially these Bible stories, they have been some of the most impactful pieces of literature that have ever existed on this planet. And very unfortunately, most people do not understand, or, whether that's in a church or outside a church, a lot of people don't understand the story. And, that's a real shame, because as we lose that stuff, it really leaves a mark in the world. And at the very least, whether you want to believe in it or not, it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with understanding this human story that belongs to you, and it belongs to the other people that you know as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up our time right there. So if you like the show, make sure to hit that like. If you want to hit that subscribe, we'd love to have you guys on board, and we will catch you guys next time as soon as I have the outro here. And yeah, there we go. All right, well, see you next time.
I know the air I'm breathing, it's no good for my lungs. I do this every season, I hate when summer comes. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady, I've lost a million times already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy, my heart feels heavy, I've lost already, and I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. I'm always self-destructive. I take a hit, I love it. Can you give me a second? I'm slow, got blurry vision. I fall into a trap that I made by myself. Oh, and I always do the wrong thing. I'm unstable and I'm unsteady. I've lost a million times already. I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down. I feel unable and so unworthy. My heart feels heavy, I'm lost already. And I'm so sorry, but I'm not able to slow down now. Please help me see the things that I am. I don't understand. I'm doing the best that I can right now, but it's never enough. I'm not here